Marketing is persuasion. Marketing is influence. So isn't that the same? My answer is no. Those things are not the same as manipulation. It crosses the line into manipulation when it starts to strip people of their agency. If you start to take away somebody's ability to choose, creating false narratives or false pretenses around why someone should want something, that's manipulation. There is a way to do ethical influence.
Welcome to the Mastering E-Commerce Marketing Podcast. I'm your host, Eitan Koter, co-CEO of Vimy. In an era of rising acquisition costs and increased competition, this podcast is dedicated to helping you drive sales, engage customers, and build meaningful communities so you can turn passive visitors into active buyers. Now let's get started with the episode. Today's guest is Chelsea Burns, also known as the Marketing Psychologist. With over 17 years in marketing and a master's in applied psychology from USC, Chelsea helps conscious companies grow without compromising their values. She's the creator of the Belong framework, a powerful approach that blends brand science with brand strategy to build trust, foster belonging, and align a company's internal culture with its external message. Her work guides brands to scale ethically, connect authentically, and create a lasting impact. Chelsea, welcome to the show.
What a lovely intro. Thank you so much. I'm excited to be here.
Great. Chelsea, it's a pleasure to be here. Really exciting topic today, right? I love the niche that you operate in. I'm sure you're very successful. There are many companies out there need your help. But before we dive in, Chelsea, if you can think about 3 words that are most important to you, probably you're more connected to, I'd love it if you can share it with us, please.
Yeah, and I think it's probably going to be a little bit of a repeat. I was listening to the bio, but the first word that comes up is integrity. Integrity at the core of everything. The next would be belonging to yourself, belonging to and with others. And then authenticity would be the third one.
Mm-hmm. Great. So authenticity, I think, is very clear, right? I mean, it's the way to differentiate today and just make yourself truly unique out there in the audience, right? What about integrity? Why it's so important to you?
Well, as I think about how I landed in this space of ethical branding and non-manipulative marketing, there's an interesting kind of a story of origin there. But as I've sat down and reflected on how did I get here, and I think that integrity is something that has showed up in my life a lot. I grew up on a farm. I grew up rural. A handshake meant something. Your word meant something. And those values were just kind of instilled in me. And so as I moved through my career and got to higher spots on the ladder, it felt like having integrity was kind of a differentiator. The people in the rooms got smaller. They got more confidential. And you had an opportunity to be able to maybe wiggle around in some gray space without anyone knowing. But the people who could really do the right thing, even when no one was watching, I think were the people who really succeeded. So that's been really important to me.
Nice. And it has direct connection to authenticity, right? So what's authenticity? How do you define it? And specifically from the company perspective?
Yeah, so authenticity to me, and I realize that the word is kind of buzzy now. There's a lot of people who talk about it. I typically add like ruthless authenticity or ridiculously human to things because to me it's truly being secure in who you are, whether you are a person or a company, solid in your sense of self, right? You know what your strengths are, but you also know what your weaknesses are. And you hold space for both of those things. And you show up even when it's messy, even when it's not pretty, and you own those things. There's a lot of psychology behind why that's powerful. But to me, that's what it is. There's no facade. It's just, this is me. This is who I am. I am an imperfect person or an imperfect company. And this is how I move through the world.
Yeah, I totally agree. Like authenticity is like overly hyped lately, right? And everyone wants to be authentic. And I started to use, I think, the next probably level of authenticity, which is vulnerability, right? So we need to be vulnerable out there, right? This is just probably a way to just expose yourself in a world of AI, just showing that you are really, there are people behind companies and the stories are behind the people and what's inspiring is, their background, what they did, some of the lessons that they've been through. And definitely us as shoppers, that we buy through. I mean, e-commerce, for example, is all about like impulse purchase, right? This is what everyone talks about, right? So
Yeah.
there's a lot of um, psychologically involved, things that are that we think about or we don't think. It's usually something which is we don't think about it, right? And we can explain it after, but when we do that, the thing, it's really something that comes from within us. It's an instinct, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Yeah. So how do you mentioned before non-manipulative marketing, right? So please explain what you mean and how do you implement this practically in a day-to-day, term.
Yeah, I get this question a lot. Like, what's the line? Because marketing is persuasion, marketing is influence. So, isn't that the same? And my answer is no, those things are not the same as manipulation. I actually just did a post this morning on LinkedIn about this, about how for me, it crosses the line into manipulation when it starts to strip people of their agency. So, if you start to take away somebody's ability to choose, you start telling them, or you start creating false narratives or false pretenses around why someone should want something, that's manipulation. Um, there is a way to do ethical influence. Robert Cialdini wrote Influence the book a long time ago. It's been around. And then like he's now created this institute. I'm actually guest speaking at the institute as an expert to teach people like here's the education, here's the theory, here's how you put it into practice. So what it looks like is really clear boundaries. I think a lot of people in the branding space can agree that a brand is a relationship. But for whatever reason, when it's time to go from branding into marketing, into the mouthpiece, consent, boundaries, psychological safety, like it all just goes out the window. Like, oh, I know you didn't answer my last like 6 emails. I'm just gonna send you one more. Like you have no data that shows that person gave you consent to send that email. And so that's kind of what I'm doing too, is blending in. Like if we're gonna call it a relationship, which yes, I do believe it is, let's build healthy ones.
Yes. And we know most companies are focusing on performance marketing rather than brand marketing, right? I mean,
Mhm.
it's when you assess a company's brand marketing or their brand identity, what psychological cues or like subconscious signals that you pay attention to first?
So the very first thing that I do, a lot of what I do is in that pre-strategy space, because once you get to performance marketing, that's about amplification. You can't amplify correctly or without losing a lot of money in testing before you align. So much of what I do is this idea of alignment. This includes your ideal client profile research, your ICP research, and taking it beyond, it's been up leveled where we have demographics and we have psychographics, but there's more to it. So I've created some different pieces of an ICP that include things like what I call value aspiration identification. This is the intersection between the higher arching value your company offers and the higher arching value the consumer seeks. So there's research that clearly shows we're going to articulate a bunch of different stuff as consumers that says this is why we want something. It's not actually why we want something. 95% of this occurs in the sub.
15% hack, right? Yeah.
Exactly. So this intersection, when we're doing that research, will help get you a lot closer to where to even start. We talk about psychological obstacles. We talk about psychological motivators, and we do everything through this idea of interconnectedness. So everything, if it's a relationship, has to have two parties. So we're not projecting what the company wants to sell or why the company thinks that it's important. We're actually understanding the consumer. We're using data that's at our disposal. We're collecting additional quantitative, qualitative data, and we're listening to what people not just tell us, but to what they show us.
Mm-hmm.
Right? Your email metrics, for example, are not just an indicator of how well you're doing. They're an indicator of whether or not it's resonating with anyone or if they have time. There's so many different variables. We really in marketing like to take a very complex thing like human decision making and distill it down into like one acute point of conversion, the point of sale. That is not how we all operate.
Exactly. And all these attributes, I mean, are quite common in any analytics platform. Like anything that you do. And I think what you just shared is something which is more on a deeper level. How do you gather the data? I mean, how do you figuring out, what's like beneath the hood? I mean, how do you find out about all these psychological, cues and those subconscious triggers?
So a lot of this, I think, is a lens, right? You have to learn how to look through this lens. And before I ever got my master's degree, I was doing this. I didn't realize this is what I was doing. So my favorite story to tell is I worked at a university in Oklahoma, and I call them cowboys. There's a lot of cowboys in Oklahoma, but that's what they called their alumni base, were the cowboys. They had an amazing donor who donated all this money to build a beautiful state-of-the-art performing arts center. This person had connections with the New York Philharmonic. So the inaugural season in a town of 50,000 people in Oklahoma was going to feature the New York Philharmonic.
Mhm.
The whole university was thrilled. What great optics. And then afterward went, oh my God, is anyone going to buy these tickets? Like, do these people, have they heard of this before? Do they know what it is? Are they interested? Like, we're talking a very working class community. Are they going to spend the money to go put on a suit and go watch this performance? And so at that time, I was running marketing for the whole university and was offered up as kind of a resource and was helping them figure out, okay, how are you going to market this? And was looking at basically social media metrics, engagement, obviously, sentiment tracking, listening tools, those types of things. But the thing is it went a little bit deeper than just, oh, this post performs well here. Started really looking at the quantity, like what's the volume of people just talking about this on their own, and starting to connect the dots between some of the demographics and some of the psychographics that we could know about these people. And here's what happened was it spanned everyone. It was men, it was women, it was students, it was parents, it was alumni. Everyone was talking about this. And as time went on, some of the decision makers were like, the website project kind of got held up. We're going to do this donor event. We don't need a website. Let's just go. We're going to print some forms. They can fill them out. We can follow up with them. And I was like, you guys, no, you have to. They're ready. Everyone is ready to buy. They want to be a part of the story. They are excited. They want to support the community. Do not miss that mark. Look, because if you make the announcement and you have this climax of emotion and they don't have a way to not just commit, there's a difference between here's my name, send me an email, and here's my credit card. I stayed up until 4 a.m. that morning before and just kind of piecing it. I knew enough at that point, right, to just be dangerous. So you're building things and connecting, what's the free tools? We're still higher ed, and put together this whole purchase experience. They had to close season tickets 3 weeks in because season tickets are discounted. And financially, there's a certain number at which there's a tipping point. You start to lose money. They had to shut them off 3 weeks in because they sold so many.
No, nice.
So it's all right there in front of you. It's about understanding what lens to look at it through.
Exactly. This is one of the difficulties for any marketing team these days, right? This overwhelming amount of data. The question is not anymore, okay, how do I get the data? It's what exactly I want to prioritize in analyzing this data and what's important to me, right, as a company right now. I think that's the biggest challenge. So exploring these cognitive levers, let's say, so which intrinsic motivators do you find most underutilized by brands? And why do you think they're overlooked, right? I mean,
Man, what a question. What a question. I think the first thing that comes up for me is what I would call a lack of empathy. In the sense that empathy is being able to put yourself in somebody else's shoes.
love it.
There's a lot of ego taking up space in branding and marketing.
Mm-hmm. You feel like it's just if I don't know in their products, right? Their ego is just the.
And I'm a big believer in duality. So at the same time that ego can get in the way, ego is also a great motivator. It can also be a very positive thing. There's light and dark sides. What I see a lot is this ego that wants to be the expert, that wants to take up space, that wants to brag on, ROAS and conversion percent, all of these types of numbers. But what happens is when you don't show up with actual empathy for the consumer, you start talking at people and you make assumptions and you overlook things. Because the thing is like, even if you found out what worked in the last campaign, it may not work again. We're moving at such a rate of change. And there's so many things that are uncontrollable that I think a lot of people in this space, they want to take ownership. Oh, I knew exactly what time I was sending it and exactly what image and all the things. There's still a lot of like mystery around human behavior and why humans do what they do. And so I think for me, the biggest miss with intrinsic motivators is making too many assumptions instead of going out and continually asking people or giving them opportunity to show you what they actually want.
Mm-hmm. And I think in most cases, it's not their first answer, right? Because it needs to get deeper to the feeling and to the emotions layer. That's
Well, there's tools to do that. So like there's a great study where, they ask people, why'd you buy these jeans? Oh, well, the price was good, the fit was good, the color was good, whatever. Well, then they do in-depth interviews and they use techniques like laddering interviewing. Okay, because if 95% of our decision-making is in the subconscious,
Mhm.
we can't accurately articulate what we're doing while we're doing it. Everything goes up into the limbic system before it hits the prefrontal cortex.
Exactly.
Just like you said earlier, the reasoning, the logic, that comes later. Even if it's just seconds, it still comes later. People bought the jeans because they felt like the higher version of themselves. Which is why when I talk about value, like value aspiration, I'm not talking about any of these attributes. I'm talking about what are they seeking for the highest version of themselves. And so that's kind of where like I see that come into play is it's like you have to really spend some time with people, talking to people, giving them avenues to kind of draw these red threads through everything to understand what your actual value is. And then you can go articulate it through attributes and features because, yes, we still need to use language and clarity in that way. But the essence of your brand and the essence of the marketing and how it makes you feel has to be in alignment with how that higher version of someone's self makes them feel.
Yes, high version of ourselves, I think, is so important because you need to understand how people define that, right? And just log this, save this word bank, and just use it in your marketing, right? This is so powerful. And I think social, like definitely with Gen Z, I mean, the social aspect is very, very important, right? I mean, I know that they're very influenced by friends, very influenced by influencers, and social commerce.
Yeah.
I think has two definitions. One is the ability to sell over on social networks, but it's also the how our friends are influencing our purchase decision, right? And again, it's in a deeper level. It needs to be, analyzed and figuring out. So, Chelsea, I want to learn more about your Belong framework, right? Can you just walk us through the key stages of that framework?
Yeah, absolutely. So the Belong framework came about because when I was in graduate school, finishing up my master's of applied psychology, we had to conduct our own research to write our thesis. And I really wanted it to be something powerful, something that filled a gap. And belonging at that point in time was starting to get used a little bit more in the corporate space. But as most things that get adapted to a corporate space, it felt a little diluted. So I actually conducted empirical research on the construct of belonging. Back then, it was specifically within a collection of female entrepreneurs. That has since expanded. And again, with this drawing the comparisons between healthy relationships and healthy brand relationships, why not belonging? Belonging is in Maslow's hierarchy of needs. Obviously that structure has kind of been debunked and there's a little bit more fluidity to it, but it's there. And the seminal work proves that belonging is just important to human beings as food and water. It may not kill us as quickly, but the lack of it will destroy our physical, mental, spiritual health. So as I was trying to figure out a framework that, especially from a marketing standpoint, felt on brand, but also was easy to understand, Belong was the thing that I wanted to focus on, because at the end of the whole thing, I want to create brands, help guide people to create brands where people do feel a sense of belonging. Because at the same time, a sense of belonging can offset things like the loneliness epidemic. So ultimately, the belong framework is two-pronged. As always with me, interconnected. It is a framework to help teach you how to build an ethical brand that builds belonging, trust, reciprocity with people, and at the same time, helps enhance holistic human health. Because even if it's just one brand at a time, we think about the chaos that's floating around. If we can just calm that one brand at a time, it can really help people. So when we look at belong, we're walking through ways to add in the brain science. What does this look like? What is the foundation of it? What science exists? What's relevant? What's not? It changes pretty often. We want to look at some of these ways to show up with emotion and empathy and connect in those ways. We want to really leverage the neuroscience in a way that anchors it in humanity, always anchoring it in humanity. There's a lot of ways to use brain science and neuroscience to quote unquote brain hack people. Happens a lot. Teaching a cohort right now where I'm showing very specific examples of like from not so subtle to pretty subtle and how to identify these things in marketing. The O in belong is for this organic approach, because I think it's really important for people to understand that you can do this without spending a ton of money. I have been in the positions, I have managed multi-million-dollar ad budgets. They can be very successful. Again, once you've aligned, you can absolutely amplify. But I think all too often, especially when we get into performance marketing, there's this need and want to like, okay, well, just get me the results, right? When you're force feeding that, you can't have a belong brand. They're just not conducive to each other. When you start to look at the narrative, how to tell the story, when you start to look at the guided transformation, which is really the end cap of the belong framework, you'll see that I use the words guide, teach, help, all of those things because there's a partnership baked into those words. The framework itself mimics all of the things that I teach. People want to go from their desired state, or from their current state, to their desired state. They have all these obstacles in the way. Jay Abraham has a great quote where he says, if you can basically, like, I'm paraphrasing, if you can define the problem better than the person with the problem, they'll assume you have the solution.
Nice.
Right? If you show up as a guide and you say, here's my story, here was my current state, and people go, oh my God, that's my current state. And you say, and this is where I am now. And they go, that's my desired state. They will assume you know how to handle every single obstacle along the way. So that's kind of how it comes full circle.
Yes, that's the transformation that you actually talk about, right? It's from pain to pleasure, right? So that's, yeah. And what do you find companies more struggling, in this process?
Man, it's a little bit, so far it's been a little bit all over the place. One of the things that I see the most with companies, what was working isn't working anymore. And there was kind of a white knuckle, oh, well, we're just going to pour more money into it. We're going to pour more resources into it. And it didn't work because guess what? It wasn't about the exposure. It wasn't about your top of funnel. Something shifted in here, or maybe even in here or in the gut. Like the body, we're making decisions here, here, and here. Something shifted. Ultimately, the higher value seeking is probably the same. But whatever is happening in that decision-making process along the way, either something shifted or a different sector or a different competitor has taken up more space. Something has shifted. Somebody is tapping along, right, and following along, or your consumers have shifted in a way. Look at how many things just globally have changed in the past 6 months. We cannot expect people to not have some sort of shifting going on in their lives. And so that's typically what I see is people are like, man, this was working and we had huge growth and we've totally stalled out. What do we do? And they've tried a bunch of other things and then they finally go, we need something deeper. I tell people a lot, like I solve unseen problems. So when people come to me, they come to me with their seen problems. Here's all, I have all this. I know this. They need the lens to be able to kind of like tighten up that vision.
Yes, it's like the upper side of the iceberg, right? I mean, most of the answers is really deep.
Yeah.
And Chelsea, how do you make sure all the process is applied ethically, right, in companies, and rather than just maybe people think about it as a persuasion trick or something?
Mm-hmm. So I've had people ask me before, like, do you work with certain industries? No, industry agnostic. I have more experience with some industries than others, but ultimately that's probably because those industries care about people more than money, more than some others. Not saying that every company in those places doesn't care. And then they're like, well, how do you know? How do you know you want to work with somebody? Because there are people who I won't work with. And I said, well, it's not about what they say, it's about what they don't say. The people who want to do this ethically, the people who are building conscious companies because they want to disrupt for good, they may talk about money and revenue as a metric, as a KPI, because it's very clear to track. But that is not the core focus of the conversation. The core focus and the language that they are using is like, man, we have helped this many people and we want to help this many people. We know because we're smart, it translates to this many dollars, right? And so that's a little bit of kind of the vetting process, I would say. It can't just be me. So when you say like, how do you make sure that you stay on ethical lines? I'm pretty firm in my ethics and my integrity. I feel pretty good. I'm also a rather assertive person. I don't have a problem politely and respectfully raising the flag and saying, I think we're getting into some gray space. Um, At the same time, my contracts have language that's like, if at some point there is a line crossed, there is, an option for either party to back away. Because also humans make mistakes. But yeah, I would say that that's really what it is. It's a partnership on the ethical side. Making sure we're not manipulating, making sure that once money becomes the core, then you kind of end up in a little bit of a death spiral. So how do we hold space for the fact, because this is profitable. I could riddle you multiple different stats about increase this, increase that, increase this. It works because once people trust you, they trust you with their money. They trust you that you're going to help them and those types of things. But when it becomes the core is when you get really kind of caught up in this gray space of pushing some ethical boundaries.
Yes, yes. And you mentioned before this transformation from A to B, from pain to pleasure. I try to understand now about you and your business. What are usually the pains and the transformation of the pleasure that you are hearing or experiencing with your customers?
In order to do what I do and to kind of follow this, you have to be comfortable being uncomfortable. You're inevitably going to hear things you don't want to hear. You're going to be faced with things that either just don't sit right with you or, because most of the people who reach out to me, but all of the people who end up working with me, they have good intentions. But perception is reality, and good intentions don't always mean that the people on the receiving end are feeling that way about things, especially if you've had rapid growth and things are stalling out. It is hard to keep that kind of emotional resonance, that kind of trust as you scale. A lot of people start to forget about internal branding. You start to grow your team and you increase your contractors and you grow your following and you have all of these different voices. You have all of these different touch points. Creating brand alignment internally is very important. That can change someone's entire experience with your brand, your company. Is if you haven't done a good job and somebody's out there, even if it's inadvertently, you're communicating something that's a little off base or has different motivators. and is doing it for different reasons. And so, I apologize. I lost my train of thought a little bit, but I
No, no,
kind
the pain to pleasure, I mean, that you hear from your customers, I mean, they come to you, with what kind of problems, right? And
yeah,
how do you consolidate?
yeah. And because so much of it is that alignment, and that's what I was saying, is that it gets uncomfortable because we got to go out and we got to understand these people. We have to really hear them. The magic happens. There's multiple layers of listening. A lot of times we hear people stop at active listening. Generative listening, which is this deeper level, is where the magic happens in this space. Because people will tell you and show you what they want. My entire brand, my entire service offerings, all reverse engineered from what people have told me and shown me over the past, what month is it? 8, 9 months.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
But it can be uncomfortable because some people will tell you things that they don't like. And it's also the other piece of this, and we talk about obstacle. It is not the fastest route to the money. It takes time. Rushing through trust building is effectively the relationship equivalent of love bombing. It just isn't healthy. It doesn't work. And so that's the other piece of it. It's a lot of people they want a quick fix. This has had rapid results. I've seen things happen very quickly. I had a client who, doubled her annual revenue through one organic social media campaign.
Well,
Awesome. Now, backstory, she's been doing this for 20 years. She had a ton of information, a ton of data. So you got to hold all of those things. So I would say that's probably the other obstacle and pain point is if you want to do it right, you have to be willing to sit in it with people while you build the trust.
mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Chelsea, which psychological principles do you think are very important for marketing team to understand?
Such a big question. The psychological principles, actual theories.
Yeah, I mean, the thing you implement, the thing you believe. You talk a lot about trust, right? And the
Yeah.
belonging, right? So this is the core, of your offerings. Anything else that is just as important or you want to share?
So I would say the big thing for marketers
Mm-hmm.
who might be listening to this and want to apply this, Solomon's paradox is a real thing. When you're in it, you can't see it. And I had a friend of mine who was like, when you're inside the bottle, you cannot read the label.
Yeah, you don't know what you don't know, right?
Exactly.
Mm.
And this is why it's so important in this space when you're doing this. If you're doing it correctly and relationally, you have to talk to people. You have to get their feedback. You have to want more than praise. The ego has to take a back seat, and it has to be about the well-being and the value of the other person. So that one's huge. I think the other thing that comes up a lot for me when I think about actual psychological principles, pluralistic ignorance is a big one. So this idea that we stay silent because we believe we're the only ones feeling, thinking, experiencing something. Once somebody starts talking about it and you go, oh my God, I'm not alone.
Good.
Somebody else thinks like me, feels like me. I have a safe space now to talk and to show up and to move through it. And I personally have experienced this just in my own business where it was ooh, I don't want to shame people, the inadvertent reverse. If I say I believe this is the right way, am I shaming everyone else? Trying to create a space around that as you step into your messaging because you want to own something. You want to be an expert in a certain space and you want your brand voice to lean into that. And I'd read a post that was every brand needs an enemy. And I pushed back and I was like, God, but I have a tendency to see the inherent good in everyone. And the response in the comments was no, it doesn't have to be a person. It can be a thing. And that was the turning point where for me, it was okay, well, manipulative marketing is now my arch nemesis. And as I start talking about this, that's when my growth just because it broke that pluralistic ignorance. There's still people who show up in the comments on my stuff and they're like, this is just marketing. This is just, It's all persuasion. It's all whatever. This is just how it works. We've all accepted it. But I have way more people who go, you know what? Thank you. And thank you for teaching me as a consumer, because same time, even marketers and branders, we're still consumers.
Yes. Yes. So when will be the best time for like founders, leaders out there to reach out to you, start working with you?
Oh, like right now?
Yeah, but in terms of what happened with their company, obviously.
Yeah, I'm sitting here thinking, like, even if your company is doing well right now, like, calibrating and tweaking, like, GPT-5 just came out. Like, look at the rate of change of things. The world is shifting a lot. Um, and you're in a space now where, like, it's polarizing. If you take a stance one way, it feels like you ostracize a whole nother group of people. And depending on the gray space, that may or may not be okay. To answer your question the way you intended it, if you have seen problems, you're feeling some pain, you're not sure what's happening. Or even if things are going okay, but you're like, man, I just really do think that they could go better. I know it's a hard year, but other people are doing it. I have a variety of different services at different price points, specifically designed for people who just want to like get a little gut check, all the way up to people who are like, I need one-on-one help for a duration of time. So I would say as soon as you start to kind of see those things, or if you're listening to this and you think, I don't know if we do that.
Sure.
I've got booking links all over. I do free 30-minute calls with people just to chat, educate a little bit more. I think this is really important. It's a passion of mine. So even if it's just having a conversation to elaborate on one of these components or something, that's an option as well.
Sure. And how people can find you and reach out to you?
Yeah. So my favorite place to be is LinkedIn, Chelsea Burns. You'll find me. Send me a connection request. Let me know you listen to the podcast. Reach out. Would love to connect. Have a coffee chat. I also have the-marketing-psychologist.com.
Perfect. Chelsea, anything else you want to add?
No, this was a lovely conversation. I really appreciate it. Any opportunity to talk more about building healthy brand relationships and healthy marketing, I'm here for. So I appreciate the space.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. It was super, super interesting. Thank you, Chelsea, and all the best. Thank you for listening to the end of this episode. If you found this episode valuable, please subscribe so you won't miss any of our future content. Explore Vimy, the video commerce platform that includes live shopping, shoppable video, and social commerce capabilities. Visit Vimy at www.vimy.net. We appreciate your support and look forward for bringing you more valuable insight in our next episode.